The Forbidden Alliance Captain Marcus Steele stood on the bridge of the UES horizon, watching the massive alien fortress grow larger on the view screen. The Nexus Collective had ruled this sector of space for over 1,000 years. Their empire, built on fear and military might, no species had ever dared to approach their capital world uninvited. Until today. "Sir, we're receiving multiple targeting locks," reported Lieutenant Zara Voss from the tactical station. Her voice remained steady. Despite the dozens of alien warships surrounding them, they could turn us into space dust in seconds. Marcus nodded calmly. The bridge crew of the Horizon had volunteered for this mission, knowing it might be their last. Earth's High Command had called it Operation Lifeline, but the crew had their own name for it, the Desperate Gambit. "Open a channel to the Nexus fleet," Marcus ordered. The main screen flickered, showing the angular face of a Nexus war commander. The alien's 4 eyes glowed with suspicion, and his mandibles clicked in what humans had learned was their version of laughter. "Humans," the commander spoke through the universal translator. "You have entered forbidden space. Your primitive species was warned to stay in your small corner of the galaxy. Explain why we should not destroy you immediately." Marcus stepped forward, his uniform bearing the scars of countless battles. Earth had been fighting a losing war against the Krillian horde for 3 years. Entire colonies had been wiped out, and humanity was running out of time. The Nexus Collective was their only hope, even if it meant dealing with beings known throughout the galaxy as ruthless conquerors. "We come bearing a gift," Marcus said simply, "something that will interest your scientists greatly." The alien commander's eyes narrowed. "Humans have nothing we want. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your military is weak compared to the Krillian forces you cannot defeat." "Perhaps," Marcus replied, "but we have something you've never seen before, something alive that thrives in conditions that would kill your strongest warriors." Behind Marcus, his science officer, Dr. Jonathan Pierce, monitored the biocontainment units in the ship's cargo hold. Each unit contained specimens from Earth's most extreme environments. Deep-sea creatures that lived near volcanic vents, bacteria that fed on radiation, plants that grew in acid soil. To most aliens, these organisms would seem like impossible nightmares. To humans, they were simply life doing what it did best. Surviving, the Nexus commander paused, his mandibles stopping their clicking. The Collective had conquered hundreds of worlds, but they had never encountered a death world like Earth. Their own planet was a carefully controlled environment, protected by technology from the harsh realities of nature. "You will transport to our station," the commander finally decided. "But know that if this is some human trick, your entire species will pay the price." As the Horizon's crew prepared for transport, Marcus couldn't help but smile. The aliens had no idea what they were about to witness. Earth's greatest weapon wasn't technology or military might. It was life itself, forged in the crucible of a world that never stopped trying to kill everything on it. The screaming discovery. The Nexus research station was a marvel of alien engineering, its crystalline walls humming with energy. Dr. Jonathan Pierce followed the alien escorts through corridors filled with specimens from across the galaxy. Each creature was contained in sterile environments, kept alive but separated from anything that might harm the station's occupants. "Your containment methods are impressive," Pierce observed to the lead Nexus scientist, a being called Researcher Keith, "but I notice everything is isolated from natural elements." Keth's translator conveyed confusion. "Of course, life is fragile. It must be protected from harmful environmental factors. Only through careful control can we study biological systems safely." Pierce exchanged a glance with his assistant, Dr. Rebecca Torres. Both humans understood that the Nexus approach to biology was completely backward from Earth's perspective. Where aliens saw the need for protection, humans saw opportunities for adaptation. They entered the main laboratory, where Captain Steele was already in discussion with High Researcher Vex, the station's commander. The aliens' multiple eyes studied the human biocontainers with obvious skepticism. "These are the life forms you claim are so remarkable?" Vex asked. "They appear ordinary. Small, weak, unsuited for survival in harsh conditions." "Perhaps we should run some tests," Pierce suggested, setting up his portable scanner. "With your permission, I'd like to subject these specimens to environmental stresses similar to what you might find on contested worlds." The Nexus scientists gathered around as Pierce opened the first container. Inside was a small plant from Earth's Antarctic regions, barely visible against the container's base. Keth immediately began adjusting the chamber's atmosphere, increasing radiation levels and temperature. "This will kill your specimen within minutes," Keth warned. "We should reduce the environmental stress." "Actually," Pierce said calmly, "could you increase it? This plant is from a region where temperatures drop to -60 degrees Celsius, and summer lasts only 2 months. The Nexus scientists looked at each other with confusion. Their own plant life required precise conditions to survive. The idea of vegetation thriving in extreme environments was foreign to them. As the environmental controls adjusted, something unexpected happened. The Nexus biosensors began detecting unusual electromagnetic signatures from the human specimens. The readings were unlike anything they had seen before, complex, chaotic, and incredibly intense. "Warning," the station's computer announced. "Detecting extreme biostress indicators from alien specimens, cellular activity suggesting massive trauma." Researcher Keth checked his instruments frantically. "The readings show your organisms are experiencing catastrophic cellular damage. They should be dying in agony." Pierce looked at the readings and smiled. "Actually, they're just getting started. The plant in the chamber was not dying. Instead, it was growing. Its roots spread through the simulated harsh soil, its leaves darkened to absorb more radiation, and new shoots began emerging from its base." The biosensors continued screaming their warnings, but the plant was obviously thriving. Dr. Torres opened a second container, revealing what appeared to be a small, worm-like creature. "This is from the deep ocean near underwater volcanoes. The water temperature there reaches over 400 degrees Celsius." She placed the creature in a test chamber and gradually increased the heat. The Nexus scientists watched in horror, as their sensors indicated the organism should be cooking alive. Instead, the creature began moving more actively, feeding on minerals that would be toxic to most life forms. "Impossible," High Researcher Vex whispered. "Your creatures show all the biological markers of extreme distress, yet they appear to be enjoying these conditions." Captain Steele stepped forward. "That's because you're interpreting the data wrong. What you're calling screams of agony, we call the sounds of life refusing to quit." The Nexus scientists stared at their instruments in disbelief. Every reading suggested the human specimens should be dead, yet they were clearly not just surviving, but thriving in conditions that would sterilize most known life forms. Pierce opened a third container, revealing bacteria samples from Earth's most radioactive environments. These organisms actually feed on radiation. They've learned to turn your planet's most dangerous energy source into food. As the implications began to sink in, the Nexus scientists realized they weren't just looking at unusual life forms. They were witnessing something that challenged everything they thought they knew about survival in the universe. The impossible Truth High Researcher Vex stared at the bio readings in complete silence. Around him, his team of scientists ran test after test, each result more impossible than the last. The human specimens were not just surviving the extreme conditions, they were adapting to them in real time. "Run the atmospheric composition test again," Vex ordered his subordinate, Technician Zolt. There must be an error in our sensors. Dr. Rebecca Torres watched the aliens scramble to understand what they were seeing. She opened another container, revealing a small fish that glowed with its own bioluminescence. This comes from the deepest parts of our oceans, where the pressure would crush most spacecraft. She placed the fish in a pressure chamber and gradually increased the force. The Nexus scientists expected to see the creature's biological systems failing. Instead, their instruments detected the fish becoming more active, its cellular processes actually speeding up under the crushing pressure. Captain Steele addressed the gathering crowd of alien researchers. Every world you've conquered, you've had to terraform first, haven't you? Change the atmosphere, adjust the gravity, control the weather. Researcher Keth nodded slowly. Of course, life requires specific conditions to survive. Too much variation and biological systems collapse. That's where you're wrong, Dr. Pierce said, opening his final container. Inside was what appeared to be a simple moss, green and unremarkable. This plant grows on the sides of active volcanoes. The soil is pure acid, the air is filled with toxic gases, and the temperature changes by hundreds of degrees daily. He placed the moss in the most extreme test chamber the station had, one typically used to study the breakdown of materials under impossible conditions. The environmental controls pushed radiation, heat, pressure, and chemical toxicity to levels that would destroy most known materials. The moss began to spread. Your readings, Pierce explained calmly, show cellular activity that your science interprets as death screams. But you're measuring life forms that have been fighting for survival since the moment they were born. What sounds like agony to you is actually the sound of victory. Technician Zolt's voice was barely a whisper. How is this possible? These conditions should sterilize any biological matter. Dr. Torres smiled. Because Earth doesn't coddle its children. Our planet has ice ages that freeze entire continents, volcanic periods that turn the sky black with ash, meteor impacts that reshape geography, and radiation storms that would kill most galactic species. She gestured to the thriving specimens. Around them, every organism you see here is the product of billions of years of planetary warfare. Earth doesn't just create life, it forges it in conditions that would break most worlds. High researcher Vex was studying the genetic scans of the human specimens. These cellular structures, they're designed for adaptation. Most life forms are specialized for specific environments, but yours are generalists, Captain Steele finished, capable of surviving anywhere because they've learned to survive everywhere. The implications were staggering. The Nexus Collective had built their empire by finding worlds suitable for life and adapting them to their needs. They had never encountered a species that could adapt to any world, regardless of conditions. The Krillian Horde, Vex said suddenly. They are winning against your species because they are pure warriors, bred for nothing but combat. But if your life forms are this adaptable... Pierce nodded. That's exactly right. We're not losing because we're weak. We're losing because we're fighting a war of attrition against a species that breeds faster than we can kill them. But if we had allies who understood the value of adaptive strength... The chamber fell silent, except for the humming of the biosensors, still screaming their warnings about life forms that refused to die. The Nexus scientists were beginning to understand that they weren't just looking at unusual organisms. They were looking at the biological foundation of a species that might be the galaxy's greatest survivors. The question now was whether the Nexus Collective would see humans as potential allies or as a threat that needed to be eliminated before it grew too powerful. The answer would determine the fate of two civilizations. The alliance forged in understanding. Nexus High Council chamber buzzed with urgent conversations as representatives from across the collective gathered to witness the human demonstration. High Researcher Vex had called an emergency session, claiming the humans possessed biological capabilities that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Captain Steele stood before the assembled aliens, his uniform bearing the battle scars of humanity's desperate war against the Krillian horde. Behind him, Dr. Pierce and Dr. Torres prepared their final demonstration using specimens that would challenge everything the Nexus believed about life and survival. "Honored Council," Vex began, his 4 eyes reflecting the chamber's crystal lighting. "What you are about to witness will fundamentally alter our understanding of biological warfare and planetary colonization." Council Prime Xeris, the ancient leader of the Nexus Collective, leaned forward on his floating throne. His voice carried the weight of 1,000 conquered worlds. "You claim these humans possess life forms that could aid us against the Krillian advance. The Horde has destroyed 12 of our outer colonies in the past cycle. What can primitives from a single world offer the Collective?" Dr. Pierce stepped forward, carrying a sealed container that seemed to pulse with its own energy. "Council Prime, your forces have struggled against the Krillians because they attack worlds you cannot defend, planets with hostile environments that force you to choose between strategic value and survivability." He placed the container in the chamber's central display area. This contains life from a region of Earth where the ocean floor splits open and volcanic vents create temperatures hot enough to melt metal. Most life forms would be instantly destroyed. But Earth life doesn't just survive these conditions, it uses them. The container opened, revealing what appeared to be simple bacterial colonies. Dr. Torres activated the chamber's environmental controls, gradually increasing heat and pressure to levels that made several council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Warning!" the chamber's safety systems announced. "Environmental conditions approaching lethal thresholds for all known Nexus physiology." The bacterial colonies began to glow brighter. "Impossible," whispered Council Member Theiss. "No biological system can withstand those conditions and continue functioning." Captain Steele addressed the growing murmur of concern. "Every world the Krillians have taken from you has been a world you couldn't fully defend because the environment was too harsh for your forces to operate effectively. But what if you had allies who thrived in those exact conditions?" Dr. Pierce activated a holographic display showing Earth's most extreme environments: deep ocean trenches where pressure would crush starships, volcanic regions where the air itself was poison, Arctic wastelands where temperatures dropped below what most aliens considered absolute survival limits. Each of these environments has produced life forms that not only survive but dominate their ecosystems, he explained, and every human carries genetic material influenced by all of them. The demonstration continued with specimens that fed on radiation, plants that grew in pure acid, and organisms that could survive in the vacuum of space for extended periods. With each example, the Nexus Council members grew more silent and thoughtful. Council Prime Xeris finally spoke. "You are suggesting an alliance, but what assurance do we have that humans will not eventually become a threat to the Collective itself?" Captain Steele had expected this question, "because we understand something about survival that your empire has forgotten. The strongest civilizations aren't built by conquering the weak. They're built by allying with those who can survive what you cannot." He gestured to the thriving specimens around them. "Earth didn't make us strong by protecting us from danger. It made us strong by forcing us to adapt to danger. We don't want to rule the galaxy, Council Prime. We want to save it from species. Like the Krillians who see strength only in destruction." High Researcher Vex added his support. "The genetic adaptability we've observed could revolutionize our colonization efforts. Instead of terraforming worlds to suit our needs, we could develop hybrid organisms that make any environment habitable." Dr. Torres opened her final container, revealing a small plant that seemed to shift and change as they watched. This is from Earth's most radioactive region. Not only does it survive radiation that would kill most galactic species, it actually uses that radiation to accelerate its growth and reproduction. The plant was placed in a chamber, flooded with radiation levels equivalent to a planetary defense grid. Instead of dying, it began growing faster, its roots extending and its leaves multiplying before their eyes. The chamber fell completely silent. Council Prime Xeris rose from his throne, his ancient voice carrying new respect. Captain Steele, the Nexus Collective offers humanity full membership and military alliance. Together, we will show the Krillian Horde what true adaptive warfare looks like. As the Council voted unanimously for alliance, Captain Steele knew they had achieved something unprecedented. Two powerful civilizations united not by conquest, but by mutual recognition of strength forged through survival. The galaxy's new guardians, 6 months after the alliance, the combined human Nexus fleet approached the contested world of Kepler 442b. The planet had fallen to the Krillian Horde 3 weeks earlier, its Nexus defenders forced to retreat when the Krillians released biological weapons that turned the atmosphere itself into poison. Captain Steele commanded the operation from the bridge of the newly constructed UES Symbiosis, a hybrid vessel incorporating both human adaptability concepts and Nexus technological superiority. Around him, mixed crews of humans and Nexus worked together with an efficiency that had surprised both species. "Sir, we're detecting massive Krillian forces on the surface," reported Lieutenant Commander Zara Voss, now serving as the fleet's tactical coordinator. "They've deployed their standard bioterror weapons. The atmosphere is now 90% toxic to most known life forms." High Researcher Vex, now serving as the fleet's science advisor, checked his readings from the science station. "Confirmed, Captain. Standard Nexus forces would require full environmental suits and could only operate for limited periods before biological breakdown." Captain Steele smiled, remembering the faces of the Nexus Council when they first saw Earth life forms thriving in impossible conditions. "Good thing we're not using standard forces. Dr. Pierce, status on our special deployment teams?" Dr. Jonathan Pierce, now director of the Human Nexus Biological Warfare Division, activated his console, showing the biosignatures of their ground forces. "All teams ready, Captain. The enhanced Nexus soldiers have been successfully adapted with Earth-based biological modifications. They're not just surviving the hostile atmosphere, they're actually gaining strength from it." The revolutionary breakthrough had come when human scientists discovered that Earth's biological adaptation mechanisms could be temporarily shared with other species through carefully designed symbiotic organisms. Nexus volunteers had been paired with modified Earth bacteria that allowed them to process toxins as nutrients and use hostile radiation as an energy source. "Beginning orbital deployment," announced the fleet commander, a Nexus warrior named Battle Prime Corex, who had volunteered for the first human bio-enhancement procedures. His voice carried new strength and confidence. On the planet's surface, Krillian forces had established their typical dominance pattern, massive hive structures that pumped toxic waste into the environment while their warriors bred new generations of soldiers in the poisoned atmosphere. They had used this strategy to conquer dozens of worlds, always counting on their enemies' inability to fight effectively in the toxic conditions they created. They had never faced an enemy that could turn poison into power. The first wave of enhanced Nexus human hybrid forces dropped through the toxic atmosphere without protective gear. Their modified biology actually grew stronger as they breathed the poisoned air, their enhanced cellular structures converting the Krillian bioweapons into usable energy. Dr. Rebecca Torres monitored the battle from the fleet's bio-command center. All teams showing enhanced performance in the toxic environment. Heart rates elevated but stable, cellular activity increased, immune responses actually strengthening under exposure to Krillian biological agents. The Krillian commanders had no response to enemies who grew stronger in conditions designed to kill them. Their bioweapons, refined over centuries of conquest, were not just useless, they were actively helping their enemies. "Sir," Voss reported, "from tactical, Krillian forces are attempting to retreat. They appear to be confused by our troops' ability to operate in the toxic environment." Captain Steele watched the battle displays with satisfaction. The Krillian horde had built their empire on biological superiority and environmental warfare. They had never encountered an enemy that could adapt faster than they could poison. "Open a channel to the Krillian command ship," Steele ordered. The screen showed an insectoid creature whose compound eyes showed confusion and growing fear. "Humans," the Krillian commander hissed through the translator. "Your species was marked for extinction. How do you survive our perfect biological weapons?" "Because," Captain Steele replied calmly, "we learned something you never did. The strongest life doesn't destroy its environment. It adapts to any environment. And now we've taught that lesson to our friends. On the planet below, the combined forces were not just winning, they were thriving. The Nexus soldiers, enhanced with Earth's biological adaptability, were discovering capabilities they had never imagined. They could operate in any environment, survive conditions that would kill unmodified life, and most importantly, they could help other species do the same. High Researcher Vex looked up from his scientific readings. "Captain, we're receiving surrender requests from Krillian forces across the sector. Word of our capabilities is spreading faster than their retreat." Dr. Pierce smiled as he watched the bio-readings from their forces. "It appears the galaxy is about to learn what Earth life has always known. Survival isn't about being the strongest or the most aggressive. It's about being the most adaptable." Captain Steele nodded, watching as more star systems began sending requests for alliance and protection. The human Nexus Collective was no longer just two species working together. It was becoming the foundation for a new kind of galactic civilization, one built not on conquest, but on the simple Earth principle that life finds a way to survive, adapt, and thrive anywhere in the universe. The screams that had once echoed through space were no longer sounds of agony. They were the battle cries of life that refused to surrender. The galaxy's new guardians had been born from the marriage of alien technology and Earth's most fundamental truth. The strongest weapon in the universe is life that never gives up. Conclusion: as news of the victory spread across the galaxy, species that had cowered before the Krillian advance began reaching out to the human Nexus Collective. They came not seeking conquest or domination, but hoping to learn the secret of adaptation that had turned certain defeat into triumphant victory. Captain Steele stood on the observation deck of the Symbiosis, watching ships from dozens of worlds approach for alliance talks. Each species brought their own unique strengths, but all shared the same desire to survive and thrive in a dangerous universe. The screams that had once terrified the Nexus scientists were now recognized throughout the galaxy as something far more powerful than weapons or technology. They were the sounds of life, refusing to accept defeat, growing stronger through adversity, and proving that the greatest force in the universe is the determination to survive. Earth's children had not just found their place among the stars. They had taught the galaxy itself how to truly live.